Okay, we're back. We had just started into picking words like, or picking at words like um, enthusiasm and eagerness as opposed to excitement. And that I was mentioning that eagerness or enthusiasm for the path is actually one of the places that we get to as a kind of knowledge, that we arrive to the point of saying, yeah, I'm gung-ho. Yeah, this is the only thing. I'm really eager for this stuff, okay? That's actually an important state, which is quite different from the state of, well, let me check this out and I'll play with this and we'll see how things are going and that kind of stuff, because that's still got a lot of doubt in it. This kind of enthusiasm we're talking about is completely free from doubt. This is when the enthusiasm is there because you know that you're going to win this thing. I'm strongly avoiding telling a joke here, so out of the joke because that's complicated. In any case, we have to develop a kind of enthusiasm. Not that we have to do it, but it comes across naturally. And that enthusiasm is actually part of beginning to see the Dhamma in everything, as well as the big it or the big everything begins to expand or get bigger. And this is what we also are referring to as the expansion of the noble right view. That the more we see, the more there is to investigate. So our investigation broadens. And eventually it broadens far enough to encompass things like compassion. Because if we can really see the state that other people are in, then we will have compassion for them without having to jump in the same sewer that they're in. We can help them out of their sewer, but we don't have to jump in it with them. I'll finally have to use that as an analogy because a lot of people don't understand. Oh, if I'm going to be compassionate, I got to jump in the sewer.
I mentioned to you that we dropped out a minute. What's happened there? Oh, there we are. That my daughter has chronic fatigue.
Okay. Yes, you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mentioned that. And this has been exactly my experience because she lives back living with us now as she recovers. And, she will have low days when everything is doom and gloom, which is quite understandable. And it's very easy to get caught up in that. But I'm no real help to her if I get caught up in that. It just reinforces her emotions, I find. So it's much better to stand back from it, gladden my own mind, whilst engaging in a constructive way with her.
Well, we've already, I think, in fact, it would be quite funny if I hadn't talked about it, so I assume that we have, and that is that fatigue has a lot to do with breathing, and that she needs to start breathing more. And the way that you can get her to do that is by teasing her with it. When she gets into that down depressed, and what you can do is you can walk up and to her close enough so you can go, that feels good. Why don't you give it a try? Why don't you breathe a bit?
Well, I've been doing that.
Right.
And getting her to notice the gremlins, what I call gremlins, thoughts of future, thoughts of past, they all need shooting out of the sky. And I think she's found that very helpful, actually.
Great.
Turn it into a game.
That's a good way of doing it.
We used to, when they were young, we used to have this game called Battleships. Do you remember it?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we had an electronic version, and you put the coordinates in, and it would have this electronic voice which should have incoming, as in something's coming into attack. And it just reminds me of that. It's, as soon as you see one of those thoughts coming up, it's an incoming. Beware,
exactly.
he's shooting out of the sky.
Yes, missiles coming out of the sky, but this is the sky. Yes. So with young people or with daughters and things like that, playing with the Dhamma. One of the things that I do with Kitty, she doesn't like it too much, but now she's really getting off on it. But I would sneak up on her while she was looking at the cell phone and snatch it right out of her hand. Daddy, you didn't like that. But now she's beginning to get to the point that I can't get within 5 feet of her without her acknowledging that she knows that I'm there. And that's the training, is to get her to wake up out of the sleep of being too focused and concentrated on the cell phone and learn to be here now. But I'm doing it not in the sense of, all right, Kitty, sit down on the floor there and I'm going to teach you meditation. No, I've got a different way of doing it. And the part of the way is to sneak up on her and take her cell phone away, or tickle her feet, or to let her know that I'm close enough to touch her and she didn't even know I was there, which is very much like a Zen teacher with a Zen stick, you know.
Just less painful.
The stick itself is not painful. The noise comes from the fact that it's got two pieces that slap together because it's got a split down the bamboo. The pain is always mental, and believe me, it gives Kitty some pain sometimes when I sneak up on her. She doesn't like it, but she's waking up.
Yeah.
And teasing her and being fun with her. It's funny how kids just naturally feel bad when they could feel good.
It is. I mean, my daughter now, she's 23, and it's extraordinary how we're so good at it, feeling bad. No, I see it in myself. I just see it in loads and loads and loads of people. And it's one of the things that I noticed when in Southeast Asia was a contrast that people were essentially happy. But we in the West are a miserable bunch of sods. Really are.
I know. That's where I live.
And I don't know. Are we taught to be too invested in our feelings? Believe them? Where does it come from?
The military-industrial complex, before it had the military that deep in it. It's the industrialization that brought about cities and London of Charles Dickens' day. The factory workers, and the idea that we're the big people, we're the ones who are well dressed, and you're nobody. You're street scum unless we can put you to work in our factories where you still make very little money, but at least we can profit off of what you're doing. So it's an aristocratic mentality that came out of the Dark Ages. It's been part of humanity all along. That's what the whole idea of an emperor of Rome is. That fell apart because before that it was an oligarch, and before that it was a republic, Senate-driven. But later the Senate became kind of a bunch of yes men, sort of like the Republicans in the U.S. Senate now. Going along to get along rather than actually doing the job of governing the country. So the idea then that this aristocracy has kind of been part of the mentality of what the culture is like. and that everybody who is not in that aristocracy knows they're not in it, but that they somehow want to be or want to get the benefits of it. Where, in fact, the real aristocracy is also unhappy. They don't feel secure in the aristocracy. They're worried that you might try to come take it away from them, etc., like that. And now we've got a culture to where nobody's happy. That you have an elite few who have all of the money, power, and wealth, and everybody else wants it and don't have it. So you have the haves and the have-nots. The arising of the middle class was kind of like, well, how wealthy can the poor get? But there's still this divide between the upper class, the ruling class, and those who are, and so many of the people join the ruling class, not because they're worthy of it, but they do it in the sense of going along to getting along. They become the puppets that become partially puppeteers, so that there's puppets running puppets. Mm-hmm. And they're sort of middle tier puppetry. But nobody, again, is happy in that society. Only those who are capable of walking away from it. Dante's Inferno, I think, is the name of it, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen it in many years. But basically, it's a medieval drawing of a done in reds and yellow kinds of colors of a pyramid of humanity, with literally tens of thousands of people in this pyramid, all clawing, trying to get up to the top. And then there's one guy up on the top of it with his hands in the air like, I've made it, while 4 or 5 other people got their arms and hands on his legs trying to pull him back down.
Yeah.
And that is our society.
Yeah. You've explained that very well, actually.
Okay, so how do we get along with such a thing? Well, there's someplace on that drawing is going to be some people who were, just a couple of them, is just walking off.
Sod this for a lark, I'm off.
Right, just walk out of it, you know. Yeah. How do we get to the point that we can walk away from the society? Is one, we have to see it clearly. That in fact, that chicken incident that you're talking about, that's it. When we recognize that each one of us as a human being with all of our complexity is nothing but a chicken caught in that big chicken coop called society. And some of us pretend to be foxes, but we're all a bunch of chickens.
I am seeing it more and more and more and more, but but it is scary. There are moments. I've had a couple of flashes recently where I've just been walking around being mindful, and this flash of vertigo will show itself. And when I say vertigo, I don't mean standing up quickly and feeling dizzy. I mean looking over a void and all your frame of reference has disappeared. That's why you're having that experience. Mm-hmm. And it's your frames of reference breaking down, and that is what strikes me as, you know, this is my world. It's starting to crumble.
Right. Think about the words that you just used. Frame of reference, a picture frame, and that your reference is only inside that frame, and now you're beginning to see that frame break up and that there's a bigger picture behind it, really. Mm. There's something else going on behind this framed up box that I put myself into.
So you're giving up something to gain a whole lot more.
Not really, because we'll have to give that up too.
Yeah.
Until there's nothing. And now we're really happy when it's all gone. That's by a negative or nitty nitty, or that this is the negative path. The Buddhist path is to see that we can do without that too and dump it. And that's real freedom.
Dump the path.
Yeah, dump the past, dump our way of doing things, dumping our bad feelings, dumping our concepts even, and just living in the moment, especially dumping the past. Another one would be dumping the personality, or dumping the self, or dumping my selfishness. Another way of looking at it would be dumping the doubt, or dumping our ignorance about what is and what is not the path, so that we know what the path is. That the doubt has been cleared away. We've dumped that. So every bauble, every little gift, everything that we thought that we were, is to be let go of and give it up. An example of that would be like a hot air balloon that's full of sandbags. They're not going to go anywhere, but you get in that balloon and you start throwing sandbags out, pretty soon you're going to be leaving the ground. It's going to float, it's going to fly, it's going to be free from the gravity of the ground. And all we're doing is getting rid of stuff.
Yeah.
And then we become really joyful, lightweight, light on the foot, light on the gas, I guess.
It's getting there, but it's what this super mundane path strikes me as being so ridiculously simple.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking, we've got all these other lineages of Buddhism, etc., which put all these elaborations on top.
These were people trying to make concepts of what they experienced. And the problem is often that our conceptual background of our culture prevents us from hearing Asian concepts that lead to the experience. That what they just lead to is strange concepts. And so a lot of the stuff that we're trying to point to experience is really just left as a conceptualization. Well, what a good teacher is doing is trying to create an environment so that the students can slip out of his conceptualizations and drop that too, and just live in the present moment, live in the be here now. How marvelous it is to be just content, just this is it.
So just experience the experience as an experience, no more.
Exactly.
Don't label it.
I want more of it.
That was really pleasant. That's it.
And so coming to that state is hard because we conceptualize things and then we want those things. And the very wanting of something that we don't have is a kind of dukkha, a kind of dissatisfaction. So we need to fall into a state where we're not wanting anything. Only then can we be satisfied. So the intention is to practice being satisfied, not getting something that we want.
And therefore, turning around and saying that an experience is pleasant is in itself a conceptualization.
No, there's actually pleasure. Try
so what do you
take a deep breath and then let an out breath?
Well, yeah.
That's so pleasant.
No, it is. But then what do we do with the unpleasant?
Throw it out and take another deep breath and enjoy another pleasant breath. Sometimes you have to have sati to be on guard for that stuff that's going to come up and try to make things unpleasant for you again, just like it's been in the habit of doing your whole life.
So what? So your recent experience of your neck pain, that's not pleasant.
Yes, which means that my job now is to get my neck into a state of pleasure.
So remove whatever hindrance is leading to that pain.
Right. Which I was very successful to do with a medical doctor in Thailand, rather than Thai masseurs.
Mm.
They didn't do the job. That was not the right way to go. Pounding on a broken hand is not the right way to get it fixed. Taking a hand that's been burned in a fire and keep putting it back in the fire is not the right thing to do with that hand. Tomorrow I put it back in the fire again. Let's see if more fire will take the old fire away. Never mind, I got pus and scabs and my hand is really painful as it is. I'm going to put it back in the fire again. That's the way that we do pain. That's how we handle it. The right thing to do is that we need to get the neck into a state where it is pleasant for the moment, and then congratulate ourselves. Boy, that's nice. It's not hurting right now.
So what do you suggest where you have people that have chronic pain that isn't going away?
I would say, let's give an example of chronic pain would be carpal tunnel syndrome. You no doubt have had. Okay. All right. The answer to that is $10 pair of gloves that have a piece of aluminum, flatbed aluminum, that slip in there and keep those hands still. And yet people will put these things on their hands and then they complain about how painful this piece of metal is. I'm going to take it out. In other words, they defeat the purpose of the wrappings that they bought and put on their hands. That really you don't need those wrappings so much as you need to hold the hand still long enough for them to reknit and heal, just like you would a broken arm. Maybe 6 weeks. Okay. I was really lucky with the neck because it was trying to heal itself, but it was the masseurs who were making it worse. So not having the massage was what cured the neck. And here I am, a big fan of Thai massage. Otherwise, I wouldn't be down there having it done. But yeah, holding the hand still. That would be a wise thing to do for people who have a chronic problem. The first thing, though, they need to get it diagnosed. Because if it's kidneys, you're not going to be able to hold your kidneys still. You want those dudes working.
Well, I mean, have you heard of trigeminal neuralgia?
Where? What?
Trigeminal neuralgia.
You got me.
There's a nerve that runs through the brain called the trigeminal nerve.
Okay.
And what happens in people that have trigeminal neuralgia is this nerve gets engorged in blood vessels and it effectively gets strangled by them. Okay. And they call it the suicide disease because the pain this produces in the head is women that have had painful childbirth says there is no comparison and it doesn't go away. And that's why and that's why people committed suicide, because they just couldn't deal with it. There wasn't and so I'm very intrigued to know what people, if people can find a way of being with themselves with the pain, I suppose is what I'm saying. It's not going away. There is nothing you can do. This is how it is for you.
There is. In fact, the choice is, am I going to be completely defeated by this pain, or am I going to be able to manage it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the attitude. That's on the Eightfold Noble Path. So how can you can help a patient in that regard to change their attitude about their pain?
Mm.
Okay, part of the way that we can deal with it is, it hurts really a lot, but I've hurt worse than this. Let me use this amount of pain to get ready for the worst, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. In fact, it may get just worse, and then I'll die. So if my mind state is the only thing that I have control over, then let me be ferocious in being able to handle pain. And I would say that, in fact, I've said it on video before, that Goenka's style of strong determination sitting so that the body will go into states. An example would be that the circulation in the legs is cut off, or that the knees start to hurt. And then the idea is, can you handle this pain knowing that any moment, if you want to, you can merely move your legs, stand up, and you're okay. And so we practice on self-generated pain by sitting still for a long period of time. But I have made the joke that I would only recommend this to two different kinds of meditation students. Those who are in the CIA and are planning to go to Afghanistan and get captured and tortured. So let's get the mind ready for getting tortured so that you can handle torture happily.
Yeah.
The other group are those who would be Jesuses who expect to get crucified so that they can happily be crucified because they can handle the pain. All right, so in that regard, we could say that, well, maybe to get the person's attention off of the pain, and I was about to ask this question, where do they experience the pain? Is the pain experienced in the chest?
Trigeminal neuralgia?
Yes.
No, it's in the head. The
No.
head.
Oh, it's a headache?
No, well, the trigeminal nerves come to the front of the face, yeah, and so it'll be all through the front of the face and the jaw. I've seen someone have an attack of it, and they just go ashen. It's just
but
an
do they
awful,
move
awful.
around a lot, or do they become frozen?
No, they didn't become frozen. I think people cope with it in different ways. My friend who had it was a very sort of strong individual, and he did freeze actually, and he just all the color went out of his face.
Okay, was that because I'm still getting around to where do they experience the pain? And now I hear you saying that it's all over their face. They experience face pain. Yeah. They don't experience any pain in the chest at all.
No.
Where are the blood vessels that are surrounding this nerve?
In the center of the brain.
Oh, this is a mental or a brain function rather than, because I was imagining that this nerve had gone out of the brain down into the chest to be attacked by all of the blood stuff down there.
No. And he eventually had an operation where they go down into the brain, and it's right in the center of the brain, and they untangle the blood vessels from around the nerve, disengorge it, and they put a sleeve of Teflon around the nerve to discourage the blood vessels sticking to it again in the future.
Wow, that sounds really, really radical.
Oh, I think it's quite dangerous.
Yes, really radical. It's sort of like the way that I would be looking at it would be in the sense of how can we make that nerve strong? And so I was wondering, because I'm not sure about where the nerve, where does it go? Is it only something inside the brain, or is it go out of the brain down the stem anywhere?
No, it comes out of the brain and it goes. It feeds the jaw,
Okay.
the front, it's really the sort of the main nerve feeding the front of the face and the jaw, the trigeminal nerve.
Okay. And you say that they have this both chronically and also acutely, that
Yeah,
occasionally is really
yeah,
acute, but mostly is
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
chronic.
yeah.
Okay. Do they have full control of their facial features the way that an ordinary person would done when it's not acute?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay. So well, now we've got something to work with. So if we can keep it out of the acute into the chronic, they would at least be better off in that regard. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, this is, I haven't seen Steve in a long while. I was just looking for examples where pain is present and pain isn't necessarily going away, and how people can learn to function
Okay.
and lead a happy life whilst with that pain. Because
All
for some
right.
people, that's reality.
Okay. Now that we've gone down this far, let's go in this direction. Most people, when they have pain, they are the pain in
Mm.
the sense of I'm in pain, just like anger. I'm angry.
They identify with the pain.
They identify with the pain and they don't like it. And
No.
also, by not liking it, in a way, they don't like themselves. They don't even like their life. That this is too much for me, and they become victims to it.
Mm.
And so, um, the change of attitude about it is really remarkable in the sense of which we can get someone to come to the point of saying, "I can handle this. I can do this."
Mm.
And that they can also learn to play with it. And one of the ways that I would recommend playing with it is by taking deep breath, in the sense of, does the pain get bigger or smaller if I'm breathing deeply? If I'm
Mm.
actually paying attention to the breathing, does that help eliminate me focusing on the pain?
Mm.
So that we can get your mind off of it and onto more healthsome and healthy things, while at the same time they get the attitude that they can handle this, that
Mm.
the pain's not going to go away,
Mm.
but they can get strong. They do
Mm.
not have to be weak and succumb to the pain. They can be an emperor of their own pile of dirt, even if their pile of dirt has pain in it. They do
Mm.
not have to be the pain or wallow in the pain. They can come out of the pain. It's not me. The body hurts. I am
Mm.
not the body.
Mm.
Now, another part of that is that it's only in the sense of sensation, where it's in the face or whatever, the sensation is merely a sensation. And the client, in this case, has intense not liking for those sensations.
Mm.
That's why we call it pain.
Mm.
The pain, the more pain it is the more intense not liking the sensations that are in the face.
Mhm.
So learning to separate the sensations from the response mentally of this is painful into, oh, this is just really strong sensations I feel on the face.
Mm.
And in that regard, now they can begin to examine where it hurts, or where is the most strongest pain, because normally people are avoiding it, but going into the Goenka style, now that we've gotten a separation going, that
Mm.
now we can begin to look at the face to find out, where does it hurt the most.
Mm.
Let me separate it from that which is easy to deal with into the point of, where does it really hurt the most.
So you're
Generally,
mapping
what
it.
mapping it exactly,
Yeah.
beginning to understand it, begin to know what's going on, mapping it out. And not only that, but they begin to get insight into the fact that it's not going to be a fixed map, that the pain's going to start moving around. They can chase it down sometimes. And that gives them a feeling of power, that I can begin to do something about this pain. I'm not completely subject to it. I can piddle with it. I can control it. I can investigate it. But I don't have to be, I'm in pain. It's just a sensation of the face that needs full investigation. And this is a way of getting started. You'd be surprised at how powerful people can come to the point of, yeah, I can manage it now. I don't need the pills.
The pain is there, but I'm okay with it. I'm functioning with it. I have quality to my life with this pain.
And it's not really pain. It's just a sensation. I'm calling it pain because I don't like it.
That's the name we give to that sensation, yeah.
Right, and the pain is the word that we give to the sensation. But now that we're gaining power over it, it now becomes a teacher and even a friend. So we don't see it as pain anymore. We just see it as, oh, that's part of being alive.
When you say a friend, in that it becomes a teacher,
as opposed to something that's oppressing them, something that's beating them down, something that's harming them. Now they can come equal to it or even take charge of it.
You've been forged in the fire.
Okay.
Perhaps.
That's a way of talking about it. That's an analogy that people would understand. And then you could ask them the question, okay, so it's your choice. Are you going to be forged in your own fire? Or are you going to be burnt to a cinder? Up to you. Because now what's happening is that the people burn themselves to a cinder and nobody knows what to say to them to get them to stop doing that. But basically, Anapanasati is a cure-all. It cures everything. Because it's always the same thing of not being able to deal with our feelings. And here we're teaching a person, because this is not going to happen because you gave them one conversation. This is going to have to be maybe a training or a therapy that they have to go through. And so you can actually, the place to train then would be physical therapists, so that physical therapists that are working with this kind of chronic pain can teach the people how to manage it or how to take over it, how to live and function with the sensations, because they're just sensations. You see, here's something really important about that. And that is that these people are already in the medical establishment. They have already gone past the point of, oh, my face feels so bad. Oh, poor me, I'm going to die and I don't know what to do. Now they've gone and gotten some medical attention. And so now they have the wisdom of the doctors that this is chronic. It does hurt, but it's not going to kill you. That you will survive this. The question is, how are you going to survive it? Are you going to survive it being its prey? Are you going to survive it the way that an owner survives a dog? You put it on a leash and you take it for a walk.
Although, having said that, a lot of the medical establishments are set up, it strikes me, it was a little bit like what you were saying about the dentists earlier. You know, basically they want to keep tinkering away in your teeth for as long as possible, because that way they can make as much money out of it for as long as possible. So if we can maintain people in ill health, we'll make more money out of them.
Yes, I know that model. So, I've been there. I've done that. I've seen it clearly. My mother was a hypochondriac, so I know all about that stuff.
So we don't. So they're not necessarily trying to free you from it.
Well,
we have to do that ourselves.
Okay. So how would you put what we've just been talking about into practical use? Do you actually know someone who has this particular disease, or were you just bringing it up as an example?
I do know someone that has this particular disease, but I do know other people that are in chronic pain, and um, there are people that I've tried to help one way or another in the past, with sometimes with some success, and as we were saying earlier, you have to be very careful not to get caught up in their own stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. But my experience is that people are so overwhelmed, so invested in these feelings. This is me. I am suffering.
Oh, poor me, have pity on me.
I am objectively, as far as they're concerned, suffering. Of course, my life is miserable. Why wouldn't it be? And actually, it's not it's not easy for them to snap. It's obviously not an easy thing to change your mind about it, because you are totally invested in this concept of reality.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
I do. I know exactly what you're talking about. So people have to get to the point of saying, okay, I'm willing to try anything, including learning how to like my pain.
Yeah.
Because what else have they really got other than learning how to control it and be friends with it and kind of like it? Because it's not going to go away. Now, I also understand that the pill pushers are not going to make near so much money when people can handle their own pain. And in fact, there's an epidemic in the United States because doctors were given kind of full permission by the government to give out opiates for any painful thing there was. And so now we have an entire nation hooked on opiates because no one wants to deal with pain. Pain is, and in fact, calling it pain is possibly the worst thing that we can do. A better way to talk about it is the body's trying to communicate, and it does it through sensation.
Well, I think this is another thing that the modern medicine, don't get me wrong here, I think modern medicine does some amazing and wonderful things, but sometimes someone will get a diagnosis, say fibromyalgia or something of that sort, which tends to be a kind of an umbrella term for a whole load of underlying conditions. And because the patient's been given that diagnosis, they sort of become the label. It solidifies it.
Mm-hmm.
There is now a reason for this. It is more real because of that. And
it
that
helps
in
them
itself,
to understand it.
Well, it can work both ways. It can help them to understand it, and it can also help solidify it and make something that was they weren't quite sure about, a very certain thing, which
it could also add
makes
to the
it
symptom
worse.
list.
Yeah,
if this disease that I've told myself having now has this additional set of symptoms, I've got to go get those symptoms too, so I can guarantee that this is the right label.
And it's got a name, so it's real. Because it's at the end of the day, it's language that chops things up, isn't it? I mean, you've only got a head and arms and legs because of names. The reality is you're a whole. You're not really a series of bits. It's a convenient way of us understanding things, it strikes me.
Yes. And that we're also in the moment and experiencing, that we're just experience. And
Yeah.
we go from one moment of experience to another moment of experience, and every moment changes as it goes by. And that's the reality of it, but most people don't even see that reality happening because they've got their mind on something else,
Trying to fix a point in time.
trying to fix a problem
Yeah.
that can't be fixed or is not a problem.
Oops, what's happening here? Trying to fix a problem. Yeah.
Here's an example of that. If someone is worried about high blood pressure, the thing to do is to give them a really cheap sphygmometer and let them keep playing with it until they get to the point that they know that they're okay. If the guy doesn't have that sphygmometer and he can't check it, he's going to worry about his high blood pressure. And by worrying about it, he's going to make himself have high blood pressure.
Yeah.
That's a clear example right there that we give ourselves diseases because we think that we've got it.
Mm-hmm.
Worrying about high blood pressure is one thing that'll give high blood pressure.
Yeah.
Which means that when people have regular blood pressure or whatever, and they go into the doctor's office, and here they have to get tested for their high blood pressure, what do? They get uptight and anxious. Oh, my blood pressure is high, and guess what?
White coat syndrome, I think they call it.
White coat syndrome. Yes.
I think they call it that. Yeah.
You want to get sick? Go to a doctor.
So this super mundane path seems so incredibly simple, which then takes me to modern psychology, which seems incredibly complex.
Right. But it's still complex because they haven't learned to put the bits and pieces of the puzzle together yet. Have you ever put together a big jigsaw puzzle? Something 750 or maybe 1,000 pieces.
Yeah. I think I've done a bigger one than that as well. But yeah.
Okay, so you know that there's a point in time when there's frustration, like I don't think I'll ever get this done.
Yeah.
Or this is way too much. Okay. But over time, we keep finding pieces that do fit together. And then pretty soon the mosaic comes into shape. The Dhamma is like that. For the beginner, it's extraordinarily complicated in the sense of 4 Noble Truths, 8 Noble Path, 3 Causes of Dukkha, 4 Foundations of Mindfulness, 16 Steps of Anapanasati, 12 Steps of Paticca 5 Aggregates. Shall I continue on? 7 Factors of Enlightenment. And it seems to go on and on and on and on. Where in fact all of this stuff is just various ways of looking at the thing to see these pieces that you on this side of the piece, it looks like the Eightfold Noble Path. And on the other side of it, which is a much more advanced way, it's the 7 Factors of Enlightenment. Why? Because now the very skills that needed to be learned in the path have now been learned and turned into skills, and now they're factors of Sambhojana, factors of enlightenment. But it's the same items, okay? So now we begin to say, wait a minute, this thing is not quite so complicated after all.
Mm-hmm.
But the medical science and also the psychologists, they kind of start out that way too, in the sense that first they kind of do a literature search, and then they find out all the students of Freud and all of this, that, and the other thing, and then they go into frames of reference or modes of modalities and psychotherapy, and then they study Freud and Bern and all of that generation, et cetera, like that. Really, really complicated. And then it comes to actually the therapist training of how do you train a therapist to really listen to what someone's saying and form a bond of empathy with them. Okay, so you put all that together in a pile, and it looks like, wait a minute, psychology is really, really complicated also. until you recognize, oh no, things begin to fit together. That in fact, when you begin to see the similarities in all of the clients, you'll begin to see that everybody's coming in with the same problem. They just manifest it a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're taking a much, much higher view, or a much more noble view of things. That in the beginning, things are all around us. It's all scattered because we're too close to the ground. But once we rise above it, then we can see, oh, that piece and that piece and that piece, they fit together just fine.
So exactly the same thing happens in psychology, you're saying?
Yep.
You can get this noble view through the psychology, and it's the same view.
Mm-hmm. And if you talk to old master psychologists, you can hear, even though their language is different than the Dhamma, they still have that deep understanding of the way things work, the nature of the mind.
Mm.
Daniel Dennett is a good example of that.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of him.
So that's the idea of the noble view is that things do fit together. There is, even though there's so many different some pieces, they all fit together kind of like in a mosaic, or like a Chinese puzzle, or like a jigsaw puzzle. These are the examples that I would use. In fact, I've got a friend who lives in China. His whole life has been actually down here to watch sowing milk. I don't remember the name of the province, but I talked to him about the Chinese puzzle. He had no clue. The Chinese people do not know about Chinese puzzles. So where they came from, I don't know. But when I say Chinese puzzle to you, you know I'm talking about a box or a block. It's got strange wooden pieces that fit all together. The Chinese, they don't know that. But that's what the Dhamma is. In fact, that's what almost any modality is. Another example would be a physicist and astrophysics versus particle physics, and yet they're trying to get all of that stuff together to fit in. How does it work? What are the particles way out in outer space? How do they behave so that they form what we actually see? And so it's all really, really complicated and full of math on multiple blackboards, but it all boils down to E equals MC squared. And if you can understand that energy and matter are directly interrelated, which means a unity.
Mm-hmm.
But it took the physicists thousands of years to figure that out. Every time they thought they had gotten down to the atom. And in fact, they've got the word atom, like hydrogen atom and a helium atom and an oxygen atom, and oxygen forms into a O2 or a molecule because they can't find a better bonding agent until carbon comes along, and then carbon will mix with the hydrogen and form carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, etc., like that. But it's still these units of hydrogen and carbon, and they call them molecules when they're put together, but they're single individual atoms, right?
Mm-hmm.
The word atom means to not cut up.
Mm-hmm.
And yet hydrogen atoms, we know, are just easily divisible. There's got an electron and you've got a proton. But then you look at the proton, and sometimes there's neutrons, and they're just quarks inside there. And so the atom is not atomic. And neither are its components. Where does it actually get atomic? The answer is we haven't figured that out yet, but they're playing with strings instead now.
They still haven't figured that out. I didn't know that.
No. They still haven't figured out exactly what's going on, but they will. In fact, the answer to that will probably be the unified field theory. How does gravity, electromagnetic, and the strong and the weak nuclear forces come together in one formula? That was what frustrated Einstein. He could not come up with a unified field theory. They still haven't.
Mm. Mm.
They still haven't figured out how the universe gets together now, but they think that they'll figure it out. Just like the old psychologist figures it out, or the old Dhamma dude, he figures it out. And once he figures it out, now it's simple.
Yeah, it all makes sense.
It all finally fits into place and makes sense that way.
And
And
so by go on.
Okay, so at that point that we were talking about the path and eagerness, the eagerness or the enthusiasm means that we're having a whole lot of fun putting things together.
Yeah.
Because before it was just all scattered all over the place. Things are really complicated. But insight really is the way of putting things together so that they become more and more unified, more and more whole.
But it strikes me that this super mundane path is keeping just the practice as simple as possible, stripping it right back in order to not unnecessarily complicate the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
Would you go along with that?
Yes, and if I did, I'd call it Zen.
Yeah, I thought that might.
Because Zen cuts right through to the core, to where Theravada really loves to dance around the fire before we jump in. But Zen is direct, just sitting.
Yeah.
Zazen. Yeah. Or emptiness. Or there's no place to go and nothing to do, and the spring comes and the grass grows by itself. Just sitting, just empty, this is it. Ta-ta-ta. And that's as simple as we can make it. It's just, here it is.
But is Zen missing something?
Well, yes, it is. That's the point that we're making. We can only simplify it down so much. And basically, the way to simplify it is by knowing these pieces. In fact, the way to make things simplified is by being able to put the puzzle together, knowing what the outcome is going to be, so that we know what we're looking for. And we take pleasure in being able to put the pieces together.
So are you saying that a Zen practitioner doesn't really have a puzzle to work with?
The old Zen masters that I've known will talk about it in the sense of it's so simple, and I spent 20 years trying to get it. And when I stopped trying to get it, it just fell into place. And the answer to that is, of course. But if you listen to the Buddha carefully, he'll say you don't have to spend that 20 years waiting for things to get into place. And so that's part of what's missing in the Zen is what to do for that first 20 years so that it doesn't take 20 years. Because Zazen just sit down, and so the student just sits down. But he visits in his mind for 20 years before his mind finally sits down.
So they're having to work it out from first principles without benefiting from the lessons of the Buddha.
Precisely.
So why did that path come into being?
Well, there was a number of forces behind it, and one of them is that when Buddhism went to Japan, that was in a time when the shogunate was getting formed, and that there was still an awful lot of martial arts. And so, if you look at what Zen is actually the how to say it. Buddhism is sneaking into the West through psychology. Buddhism snuck into Japan through martial arts.
Right.
Okay, and I can give some other examples of Southeast Asia. Uh, Possibly the most interesting one is what happened in Cambodia, where the Cambodian Empire of the time, called Angkor, kind of fell apart when Buddhism came in. The Hindu priests that ran the thing were shown to be charlatans, and the army became dissatisfied with the politics, and so things kind of fell apart, making it right for the Siamese to come marching right in and taking over. Kind of an interesting story, but Buddhism has different effects on different cultures, and within Japan, its entrance was through martial arts.
And what about China?
In a way, you could say that that was also true of China. An important point is that in China, the monks could not go on alms round. It just didn't work. So they had to learn to become farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And so farming is a big part of the Chinese system. And carrying bowls of water and doing all the kinds of things that Chinese do. So in every country that the Buddhism goes to, it actually picks up on the culture that it finds itself in.
Mm.
And so in the West, it's through psychology. It couldn't come in as a religion. There was big bad Christianity there stomping on it. But in a way, the real teaching of the Buddha is even more deadly to Christianity than atheism. The Christians say there is a God, and the atheist says there ain't no God. And the Buddhist will say, well, sit down, folks, and I'll tell you all about it, but it'll take a couple of days. God's a really complicated topic to get it defined. Or another one, you have the atheist and the Christian in the argument, and the atheist says there ain't no hell. And the Christian says, the hell there ain't. And the Buddhist will say, hell, you're both in it right now.
And that's for real.
So anyway, I hope that gives you kind of an answer about the reason and the rationale behind Zen was because it came through the martial arts. So you'll have Zen and the art of archery, to where, in that regard, archery in Japan, I can see you've got a book there, but I can't see. Okay, what is it? Okay. Serendipity there. Right? Zen and the art of archery is now much more about Zen and very little about archery.
Yeah.
The original part of the archery was to hit a target. Now in Zen and the art of archery, hitting the target is an afterthought or an irrelevancy. That within Zen and the art of archery is all about the body. It's all about form. It's all about doing it correctly and going through the motions exactly correctly to launch that arrow correctly, letting the arrow find its own home.
All happening in the moment.
All of it happening right here in this present moment. But you see that also with the sword. It's the same thing. You also see it in the dojos, that Okinawan, Goju-Rai, and Jiu-Jitsu is especially. Jiu-Jitsu means the soft way. Is all about working with the mind. That all of the black belt higher dans is not about more and more strange killing techniques. That's all learned by the brown belt in the first Dan.
Strange killing techniques. I like that.
That the higher dans in the judos and the karate is all about mental control.
Yeah.
And so that shows you then that that's that connection between Zen and the martial arts.
Mm.
But you come to the United States and you've got everybody who's in anything to do with psychology, now they're into Buddhism.
So how do you think the psychology has affected the Buddhism in the West?
It's turned it into the business model that we spent so much time on last time.
Yeah.
That's the damage that was done. Is that it's actually turned. Let us say that it's turned a nice, wonderful pet into meat to be sold in the market.
Mm.
We've killed a pet. We've killed a dear friend. Chopped it up, put it out for sale in the marketplace. That's what's happened to Buddhism. And that the more the student, go ahead.
So the opposite side of that is, do you see modern psychology, neuroscience feeding the original teaching of the Buddha? Would the Buddha have taken this knowledge we have today and used it that modern science has given us? Would he have used insights from neuroscience? Would he have used insights from modern psychology, do you think?
I would think so, but he didn't, and still he figured out how the mind works. Well, he didn't have that kind of scalpel. We didn't have the background. We didn't have all of the medical stuff that happened during the Dark Ages under his belt, including all of the stealing of the corpses out of the graveyard so that the doctors could cut them up. You know, all of that history, all right? He did not have that kind of anatomy. That
so
what
you're really saying is that it is and has been shown to be an absolutely complete teaching. There was nothing else to add, only that we would have analogies and practical examples to further illustrate that teaching
new examples and new concepts to point the way.
So you're breaking up. You're just breaking up slightly. I missed that.
I said new concepts and new analogies, new examples to point the way. But the basics were already there. All we need to know is already there. And in fact, you can start bundling it back up into a tighter and tighter package and recognize that the entire teaching can be stated in dukkha, dukkha, nirodha. Or in the phrase that I like is, don't worry, be happy. That's the entire teaching of the Buddha, but that's also the entire point of psychology.
Yeah.
Or even the guys who are in chronic pain. That's still the whole point. Never mind the chronic pain. Be happy. Don't worry about your chronic pain. Yeah. Just enjoy your life. But that takes a strength of mind.
Yes, that takes this.
It takes the work. It takes the building up of the skills.
And it takes the frontal cortex, taking control of the habitual mind and saying, you are not dragging me around any longer.
Precisely. But you don't want to kill it. It's a monster. But you don't want to kill the monster. You want to make it a pet.
Tame it.
Tame it. That's what the word nibbana means.
Yeah.
In the old context of the Buddha, the word nibbana had two different meanings. One was that you take food off of a fire and it will nibbana. It will cool down so that you can eat it. Too hot while it's on the fire or just off the fire. The other one is animals, training animals. to tame the animal, including the animal in our own brain. To tame it. That's nibbana. Cool down. Down, boy.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. It's that simple.
Yeah. It's my pet.
Almost like flipping a switch. Unfortunately, the switch is sometimes spring-loaded, so we have to keep holding it there, because if we let our finger off of it, it'll pop
It
back
keeps
into the old
flipping back with the
personality.
chords.
Yeah, it'll do back and forth, but we have to keep remembering to keep turning it over to the position that we want. Are you going to be the boss, or are you going to be the slave?
I find it quite interesting because you get this enthusiasm building up, which you were mentioning, we were talking about earlier, and the whole thing starts to snowball. And but unless you watch it, you start to slip back into your old ways, your old sort of
A lot of students have that.
my old soggy, sloppy, fuzzy, foggy day thinking, or lack of thinking. It's like a sort of, the mind's like a grey fog. And you just have to take some deep breaths and snap yourself out of it again and sort of fire the whole mechanism up again.
Exactly so. What you're saying is actually so common that I would think that every student goes through this more than one time, several times. And the process is this: they're practicing correctly, they're getting good results, they really begin to feel really good. And after they begin to feel really, really good and they like it, then they get accustomed to it. And then they kind of slack off on their right effort.
Yes.
And then they fall back into it, and then they call me in saying, "I thought that I had gotten something.
Yeah,
I had worked all of that, and now it's gone." And
that's
the answer is,
my
"Yeah,
experience.
never mind. Start again.
Yeah.
You built up that sati. It'll be easier to build up the second time and the third, but you'll lose it from time to time. You'll become too satisfied." And then you'll forget about it, and then the past will sneak right back in. So if there's always then the idea of the constant vigil, or the constant being on guard to keep the hindrances out, because they will come back. And in fact, I would go so far as to say at least part of the day there's going to be hindrances even in the mind of the Arahant. But as soon as he wakes up, they're gone. And he wakes up often. But they're going to come back. We're not saying that they're going to completely disappear, but any effects of them or any of the suffering that they bring will kind of disappear, and we come into a state of homeostasis. But this is really nice. And so whatever thoughts that they have are not, they're random or they're intentioned, but if those thoughts begin to form a task that needs to be done, then that sort of bright mind will say, "Aha, I see you. That this is not just a random thought. This is a direction to go do something." And so we begin to do less and less.
Yeah,
No place to go and nothing to do, and the grass, the spring comes and the grass grows by itself. That's the Zen. But it takes a while to get down to the point where we can do nothing. We had to keep remembering, don't do anything. How do we do that? Is by start to recognize when the mind is trying to make plans to do something.
Which it's always doing.
Well, no, the better you get at it, the less you do of it.
I had this thing this morning. I woke up and it was this chain of sort of micro thoughts that led to the conclusion that I need to go for a shower. So rather than waking up and, oh, I'll have a shower, it was this preceding thoughts that led to the final thought. Now that sounds like, oh well, of course that's happening all the time, but for me that was slightly different. It was very, very quick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in a microsecond, it was.
But you're beginning to see that. You see, that's really understanding the operation of the mind, right? The mind is just so fast.
Yeah, I haven't articulated it very well, but yeah, I think.
Well, here's one point about it, though, is that if the thought has to do with, wow, a shower would be really nice, I'll go have a nice shower, is a different thought of, wow, you need a shower.
Yeah.
So that's the way of beginning to look at it. What kind of thought about a shower was it? Was it a put down? Was it a dukkha-filled moment of, oh, I'm not good enough now without a shower? Versus, oh, I'm really wonderful now, but a shower would be delightful.
It was a bit of both, really. I did need a shower. And I did think, no, it would be nice to have a shower. So, yeah.
Okay. So that's the way that we begin to look at it. What's our mental attitude? It's at the basis of all of these thoughts. If we have a really positive mental attitude, then a shower is just wonderful.
Yeah. But it was also necessary. And that's interesting because in some ways I have started doing less and less. But I'm getting around to things that I should have got around to a long time ago.
So long as they're enjoyable. But if you're doing them because you should do them,
what was the what's the name for the warriors that assurers? Yeah, there's a lot of the assurer in me, and that's melted slightly.
Right. Well, you can do it like the human and enjoy the shower. You don't have to do it like the reluctant warrior who needs a shower. So it's just a slight mental attitude change. But that actually is the driving then that one is satisfying. Oh, yeah, I'd like a shower. That would be nice. As opposed to you need a shower. You're not whole without one. You're unacceptable without one. You need one. And therefore, the shower itself is not going to be quite enjoyable. Now the shower is work because it needs to be done. But when you get into the shower with the thought of, oh, this is nice, then it gets really tingly and, oh, what a nice thing the shower is. So there's actually two different showers based upon two different attitudes.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
So that's, again, part of the enthusiasm for the Dhamma that you can look at. Right, the enthusiastic part of, wow, what a nice shower, as opposed to you need a shower. That's not so much...
Well, I've taken this. Well, we seem to have gone completely off topic, but
I know, but that's okay.
It's been so useful. It's been really useful. Really useful.
I'm glad that you liked it. I've enjoyed this too, even though we've been meandered around. But we have dealt upon a very important issue, and that is pain management. Because we can learn to manage pain by becoming the manager, the boss.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the pain is going to manage us.
That
And that's the
whole
fix.
primitive reflex system is saying, run away, this is bad, this is bad. But in the state where there is chronic pain, you can't run away. And therefore, you've got to learn to live with it. And you may as well
Learn to
make
make
it
a
as
stand.
good. Yeah, you're going to make a stand.
Well, I think that this has been a really great talk. And so I'll leave you now and enjoy. Robert,
You.
it's been delightful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and energy and knowledge.
All right. We'll see you later.
Yeah, speak soon. Hope that next day's good.